My cousin viciously hospitalized his brother's wife, and now he's the family hero. I found out the day of their anniversary. I drove up expecting a celebration, and instead found blood staining the front door and the window smashed. Inside, I saw Rebecca sitting on the couch getting her face stitched up, while my cousin Terry, who everyone teased for being a standoffish pacifist, stood with bleeding knuckles and a stone-cold face. "Terry, what have you done?" Grandma was screaming while clutching her chest. The living room looked like a bare-knuckle boxing ring. Blood splattered across anniversary decorations. Shattered glass everywhere. "You're going to prison." Uncle Pete was dialing 911. "Look at her face." 20 relatives descended on Terry like vultures. "Your brother's wife." Cousin John grabbed Terry's shirt. "On their anniversary." Rebecca sobbed, blood running down her dress. "He grabbed me by the hair, slammed my face into the table. I thought he was going to cull me, but something was wrong." Dave sat frozen in the corner. His own wife brutalized, and he just stared at the floor. Not moving, not speaking, not even looking at her. "Dave, why aren't you?" Aunt Linda started. "He knows why," Terry said quietly. The room exploded. "There's no excuse. You're an animal. How could you hit a woman?" But Dave still didn't move. After 10 minutes of everyone screaming at Terry, threatening him, calling police, someone finally asked, "Terry, why?" Terry finally answered, "She's been beating Dave for 3 years." "Liar!" Rebecca lurched forward, but Uncle Pete held her back. "Remember Christmas when Dave had that broken rib? She hit him with a baseball bat while he slept? The work scars on his back? She threw boiling water on him. If she hit him, why did he never fight back?" Cousin John asked sarcastically. Terry pulled out his phone, and Rebecca's voice filled the room. "Try to leave, and I'll tell everyone you malice Liam. I'll bruise myself up, tear my clothes, and cry Sagusal assault to the police. Who will they believe, Dave? The sobbing woman or the man?" People's faces turned, but the recording continued. "You eat when I say. You sleep where I say." Dave's voice cut through. "Please just let me spend time with my boy." Then Rebecca shooting back. "You see Liam only when I allow it. Or I make one phone call and you never see him again. I have friends who'll testify they saw you hit me." The tension in the room grew. Uncle Pete slowly let go of Rebecca's arm, stepping back. Grandma turned to Rebecca. "You threatened him?" Rebecca tried to speak, but Aunt Linda cut her off. "All those times Dave had bruises. That was you? Why didn't anyone tell us?" Mom asked, looking around. "I did tell you." Terry's voice exploded. "I told you about the bruises. You said couples fight. I told Grandma about the cigarette burns. She said Dave needs to man up. I begged Uncle Pete when I saw the burn marks. He said, 'Not our business.'" Mom's hand covered her mouth. "Oh God, you did tell me." Grandma looked at the floor. "I thought men should handle their own problems. I went to the police 3 times, Terry continued. "They said Dave had to file the complaint himself. So he tried. Then she showed up at the station with self-inflicted bruises on her arms. They nearly arrested him. After that, he never tried again." Aunt Linda stepped away from Rebecca. "Jesus Christ, Rebecca. How could you?" Dave was almost in tears when he stood up and slowly lifted his shirt. Cigarette burns covered his ribs and long scars on his stomach. The room gasped collectively. Uncle Pete pointed at Rebecca. "You did this? You burned him? This is what she did because I tried to report it." Rebecca's mask was cracking. "You pathetic little..." But there's something else even more disgusting. Everyone froze completely. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "Liam came to me a few days ago." Terry's voice broke. "He asked me why Mommy makes him do photo games in the bathtub." Everyone's face dropped simultaneously, and we all looked at Rebecca. "He asked why the computer friends pay money to watch him." Dave's head snapped up. "What?" His face went white. "What did you just say?" Rebecca's expression was now pure panic. Grandma turned on Rebecca. "You did what to that baby?" Rebecca backed against the wall. "He's lying. Liam would never. Liam told me she makes him pose without clothes." Dave looked between Terry and Rebecca, horror dawning on his face. No. He ran upstairs. We heard him talking, then footsteps. He came back down carrying Liam, who buried his head in his father's chest. "Liam," Dave's voice was shaking. "Is it true? What Mommy does?" The little boy peeked out, looked at Rebecca, then whispered, "She said you'd go to jail if I told you. She showed me handcuffs and said the police would take Daddy away forever. The computer friends send money to watch me. She makes me do things that hurt." Aunt Linda was crying. "How could you? He's a child." Dave collapsed to his knees, still holding Liam. "I found her laptop open in the kitchen." Terry's hands were shaking violently now. "I found the website. She's been selling videos of Liam for 8 months. Made $12,000 off buyers requesting custom videos." The room was pure chaos. Police arrived minutes later and took everyone away. Liam went with child services. We thought it would be over quickly once police saw the evidence. But 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Terry calling from the station. "Get a lawyer. Now." His voice was panicked. Rebecca was prepared for this. She knew I'd find out. She planted evidence. There are emails from Dave's and mine computers to the website. She made it look like we're the ones who did it. That's when I knew. This was only the beginning. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely dial the first number. I sat in my car outside the police station scrolling through lawyer listings on my phone while Terry waited inside with planted evidence on his computer. The first 3 lawyers I called went straight to voicemail, and I left messages trying to explain everything without sounding crazy. The 4th one picked up but said they didn't handle criminal cases. The 5th wanted a $10,000 retainer just to meet. I kept calling down the list. my voice getting more desperate with each voicemail I left. An hour later, my phone rang and Marina Bolton introduced herself, saying she'd gotten my message about false accusations and planted evidence. She said she could be at the station in 20 minutes and asked me to text her Terry and Dave's full names, plus the case numbers if I had them. I met her in the station lobby where she was already talking to the desk sergeant about getting access to her clients. Marina was maybe 50 with gray streaks in her black hair and moved through the police station like she owned the place. She got Terry released on his own recognizance for the assault charge after 3 hours of paperwork and arguing with the prosecutor. But she pulled us aside in the parking lot and explained that both Terry and Dave were still persons of interest in the exploitation investigation. She said Rebecca had been planning this for a while based on how the evidence was planted, and warned us this would be a long fight. Dave was released 2 hours after Terry and I drove them both to my house since neither could go back to Dave's place. Dave sat on my couch that night staring at nothing while Terry paced back and forth in my kitchen. Dave kept asking how Rebecca could sell videos of Liam like he was some product. He'd start a sentence then trail off, unable to finish the thought about what his wife had done to their son. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with family texts and calls. Half the family still thought Terry was a monster who'd attacked a defenseless woman despite hearing the recording of Rebecca's threats. Uncle Pete actually called to say maybe Dave had pushed Rebecca to this somehow and she was just protecting herself. I had to walk outside before I screamed at him that he was part of the problem. Mom called crying, saying she didn't know what to believe anymore. Grandma left a voicemail asking how we could destroy Rebecca's life over a family dispute. Cousin John sent a text saying Terry should have minded his own business. But Aunt Linda called to say she'd seen enough and wanted to help however she could. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything I could remember from the past 3 years. Dave's broken rib at Christmas that Rebecca said was from falling off a ladder. The burns on his back she claimed were from a welding accident at work. The black eye from supposedly walking into a door. The cut on his head from slipping in the shower. Every injury had an excuse and we'd all just accepted them without question. The pattern was so obvious when I wrote it all down in one place. Marina called that afternoon with homework for all of us. She needed character references from Dave and Terry's employers, friends, anyone who could speak to their character. She wanted employment records showing where they were during the times the exploitation emails were sent. Bank statements, phone records, anything that could help establish their whereabouts and activities. She said the prosecutor would decide whether to file formal charges in 3 days, so we had to move fast. I spent hours calling Dave's coworkers and Terry's boss, explaining what I could and asking for written statements. Most people were shocked, but willing to help once they understood what was really happening. Scott Shepard from CPS called while I was gathering documents. He said he needed to interview me about Liam's placement since both parents were under investigation. He explained they had to find the safest temporary arrangement and asked about my relationship with Liam. My stomach dropped when he said Liam might go to a foster family if no relatives qualified. I immediately said I'd take him and asked what I needed to do to make that happen. Scott said I'd need background checks, home inspection, references, and a bunch of other requirements. The next day, Detective Nadia Carrillo showed up at my door with a recorder and notepad. She was professional, but I could tell from her questions that she'd seen this kind of thing before. She asked about the anniversary party. Who was where? Who said what? The exact sequence of events? She wanted to know about Rebecca's injuries, how bad they looked, where exactly Terry had hit her. Then she asked about Dave's behavior, whether he seemed surprised by Terry's accusations, or like he already knew. She took notes on everything, asking me to repeat certain details to make sure she had them right. Marina brought in Victor Metz 2 days later to examine Dave and Terry's computers. Victor was young, maybe 30, with thick glasses and explained he specialized in cases where evidence was planted remotely. He needed the computers immediately to preserve any proof of tampering before it could be erased. Terry handed over his laptop right away, but Dave's was still at the house with Rebecca. Marina had to file an emergency motion to get access to it. Victor said time was critical because remote access logs could be deleted at any moment. He started examining Terry's computer in my living room, connecting it to his own equipment and typing commands I didn't understand. After 20 minutes of Victor working on Terry's laptop, I decided to call CPS to check on Liam while Marina talked with Dave about getting his computer from the house. The woman who answered said she couldn't give me any information since I wasn't a parent or legal guardian. I explained I was family and just wanted to know if he was okay, but she kept repeating the same policy over and over. My hands were shaking when I hung up, because this kid was protected by rules from the only people trying to help him. Dave's phone started ringing nonstop that afternoon with people from work asking if the rumors were true. His boss called and said he had to go on unpaid leave until the investigation cleared up. Dave just sat there staring at the wall while I watched our savings drain away in real time. Marina came back the next morning with a stack of papers she'd filed at the courthouse. She explained the judge granted the order to preserve all digital evidence from Rebecca's devices, but wouldn't issue protective orders until Rebecca filed her own paperwork. Dave finally started talking that night about what living with Rebecca was really like. She'd wake him up every 2 hours at night by shaking him or throwing water on him if he didn't respond fast enough. She controlled every meal, measuring out portions and locking the fridge with a bike chain. She deleted his friends' numbers from his phone and showed up at his work if he was 5 minutes late coming home. Every detail made my stomach turn because we'd seen the signs, but never put them together. Terry met with Marina at her office while I stayed with Dave. When Terry came back, he said Marina wanted him to consider a plea deal, but he refused anything that meant admitting he was wrong. He kept saying he'd do it again tomorrow if it meant protecting Dave and Liam. 3 days later, I drove Dave to his first therapy appointment because his hands were shaking too bad to drive. The therapist's office was in a small building downtown, and Dave could barely walk through the door. He sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes before the therapist came out, and when she asked him to come back, he froze completely. I had to walk him to the office and sit with him for the first few minutes. He couldn't even say Rebecca's name without his voice breaking. The therapist was patient, but I could see how much work this was going to take. Victor called that afternoon with news about the computers. He'd found remote access software installed on both Dave and Terry's laptops that would let someone control them from anywhere. Marina said this was huge for our case, but we needed proof that Rebecca was the one who installed it. Victor explained the software had been there for months, hidden deep in the system files where nobody would think to look. 2 weeks passed before the first preliminary hearing. Rebecca showed up wearing a neck brace and had fresh bruises on her arms that looked way worse than what Terry actually did. She limped to her seat and kept touching her face like it hurt. The judge looked at her injuries and maintained the no-contact order, then set another hearing for 2 weeks later. Dave had to leave the courtroom when Rebecca started crying about how scared she was. That same day, Scott Shepard finally called back about Liam. He said Liam was in emergency foster care, but they were looking at family placement if someone could pass the background checks. I immediately said I'd take him and asked what paperwork I needed. Scott said he'd email me everything and we could start the process right away. I spent the next 3 days filling out forms, getting references, and scheduling the home inspection. Detective Carrillo came by again the following week with questions about Rebecca's finances. She'd found records of prepaid cards being bought at stores near Rebecca's work over the past 8 months. Each card was used to pay for the website hosting where the videos were uploaded. She couldn't prove Rebecca bought them yet, but she said the pattern was clear. The cards were always purchased during Rebecca's lunch break according to the timestamps. The amounts matched exactly what the website charged for premium hosting. Carrillo said she was building a timeline and needed a few more pieces before she could make it stick. Dave was getting worse before he got better, waking up with nightmares and checking the locks constantly. I moved him into my spare room because he couldn't handle being alone. Some nights I'd find him sitting in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, just staring at pictures of Liam on his phone. The therapy was helping, but progress was slow when you're trying to undo 3 years of programmed fear. Marina kept pushing for more evidence while Rebecca's lawyer sent threatening letters about defamation and harassment. The whole thing felt like drowning in slow motion, while everyone watched from the shore. 3 days later, Grandma showed up at my door without calling first. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying for hours. She pushed past me into my living room where Dave was sitting on the couch staring at his phone. She dropped to her knees in front of him and grabbed his hands. "I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't believe a woman would do that to her husband. Dave just looked at her while tears ran down her face. She kept squeezing his hands and telling him how she should have listened to Terry. She said she grew up thinking men were supposed to handle their own problems and never ask for help. Dave finally pulled her up and hugged her while she sobbed into his shoulder. It was the first time anyone in our family had actually apologized to him. Marina called an hour later with news about Dave's work records. She'd gotten copies of all his time cards from the past year and found something important. Several of the emails from Dave's computer to the exploitation website were sent while he was clocked in at work 20 miles away. The timestamps proved he couldn't have sent them unless he was in 2 places at once. Marina said it wasn't complete proof, but it helped show reasonable doubt. She was building a timeline of every email and matching it against Dave's location. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from Rebecca's lawyer. I opened it since Dave's hands were shaking too bad to hold the paper steady. The letter offered to drop all the false allegations against Dave and Terry if Dave agreed to give Rebecca full custody of Liam and pay $2,000 a month in child support. Marina called it straight-up extortion when I read it to her over the phone. She filed a complaint with the State Bar Association that same day. She said Rebecca's lawyer was basically threatening to continue false criminal charges unless Dave paid up. That afternoon, I was going through old family videos on my computer looking for anything that might help. I found our Christmas video from 2 years ago when everyone came to my house. In one part, Liam runs up to hug Dave around the waist and Dave winces hard, pulling back from his son. At the time, we thought he was just being weird, but now I could see he was protecting broken ribs. Terry had told us about the baseball bat, but seeing Dave actually hurt on video made it real. Every piece of evidence we found made me madder at myself for not seeing what was happening. Scott called the next day about Liam's forensic interview. CPS had scheduled it with a specialist named Moira Appleby, who worked with kids in these situations. Dave wasn't allowed to be there because of the investigation, but Marina could send someone to observe from another room. I volunteered immediately since I was already Liam's emergency placement. Scott said the interview would happen in 3 days at the Children's Advocacy Center downtown. Meanwhile, Victor was digging through the technical evidence and found something huge. He tracked the IP addresses from the exploitation website back to our neighborhood's internet provider. The account was registered only in Rebecca's name because she'd set it up before Dave moved in with her. Victor said this could help prove she had exclusive control over the internet access. He was building a digital timeline showing when the uploads happened and matching them against Dave's work schedule. Mom came over that night while I was making dinner for Dave. She sat at my kitchen table and stared at her hands for 10 minutes before speaking. She finally admitted she remembered Terry trying to tell her about Dave's bruises. She started crying hard, saying she just couldn't imagine Rebecca hurting anyone. She thought Terry was exaggerating or misunderstanding what he saw. She kept saying she should have listened and asked more questions. The forensic interview happened 3 days later at a building that looked like a regular house from outside. Moira took Liam into a room with toys and coloring books while I watched from behind one-way glass with Marina's assistant. Liam told Moira about the photo games in the bathtub and how Mommy said it was their special secret. He said Mommy told him the computer friends liked watching him, and they sent money for toys. The details got worse as he kept talking. Several people in the observation room had to step outside, including the prosecutor's assistant. Liam said Mommy would get mad if he didn't smile right or stand how she wanted. He showed Moira on a doll where it hurt sometimes. The whole interview took 2 hours, and they recorded everything for evidence. 2 days after the interview, Rebecca's mother called Dave's work and started spreading rumors about him. She told his boss that Dave was under investigation for child abuse and shouldn't be around customers. Marina documented everything and filed contempt charges since Rebecca was violating the no-contact order through her mother. Dave's boss called him into the office but thankfully stood by him after Marina explained the situation. The worst part came that Friday when Dave tried to buy groceries and his debit card got declined. We called the bank and found out Rebecca had claimed identity theft on their joint credit cards. She'd reported $12,000 in charges as fraudulent, and the bank froze everything while they investigated. Dave had receipts for most of it showing normal household expenses, but the bank said it could take weeks to sort out. Marina had to file emergency motions to get Dave access to his own paycheck. We spent the whole weekend gathering 3 years of receipts and bank statements to prove the charges were legitimate. Dave sat at my kitchen table Monday morning staring at the legal fee estimate Marina sent over. His hands shook as he pushed the paper toward me, showing $60,000 minimum just to fight the false charges. He mentioned maybe he should just plead guilty to make everything stop since Rebecca had already destroyed his life anyway. I grabbed my laptop right there and started setting up a crowdfunding page with the title, "Father Framed by Abusive Wife Needs Legal Help," while Dave protested that he didn't want charity. Within 2 hours of posting it on local Facebook groups and Reddit legal advice forums, we had $300 from strangers and nasty comments from Rebecca's friends calling us liars. Some people stepped up though, including Dave's old college roommate who sent $5,000 with a note about always knowing Rebecca was trouble. Detective Carrillo called Tuesday afternoon saying she got a warrant for Rebecca's work computer after the IT department confirmed she had admin access to company systems. The detective drove to Rebecca's office with 2 other officers and seized her desktop while her coworkers watched in shock. Carrillo found browser history showing visits to the exploitation site during work hours going back 6 months, with specific timestamps matching when the videos were uploaded. Rebecca's lawyer immediately filed a response claiming she was researching online predator tactics to protect Liam from internet dangers and demanded the evidence be thrown out as prejudicial. Marina called that evening with news that Terry's assault trial got scheduled for 3 months out, which she said was actually good timing. She explained we could use those months to build a solid defense of others' argument showing Terry was protecting Dave and Liam from immediate harm. The prosecutor seemed confident they'd get a conviction, but Marina had handled these cases before and knew how to present the abuse evidence to a jury. Thursday, I went to a support group for families dealing with CPS cases that Marina recommended. The meeting was in a church basement with about 20 other people all looking exhausted and defeated. The facilitator explained how fathers face an uphill battle in custody cases, especially when abuse allegations exist even if they're false. One man talked about fighting for 3 years just to get weekend visits with his daughter after his ex-wife made false accusations. Another guy lost his kids permanently because he couldn't afford a good lawyer to fight the lies. Their stories made me realize this could drag on for years and drain everything Dave had both financially and emotionally. Victor called Friday morning practically yelling with excitement about what he found digging through credit card records. The remote access software on Dave and Terry's computers was purchased using a credit card in Rebecca's maiden name that Dave never knew existed. She'd kept the account open for 8 years, making small purchases to maintain it as a backup plan. Victor traced the billing address to a P.O. box Rebecca rented near her office where statements were sent instead of their home. The software purchase happened 2 weeks before Terry found the laptop, which proved Rebecca was planning this frame job in advance. Saturday brought good news and bad news from Scott at CPS. Dave passed all their requirements, including drug tests, background checks, parenting classes, and psychological evaluation with flying colors. The bad news was they said reunification would take months minimum, even with perfect compliance because of the severity of the allegations. Dave could start supervised visits for 2 hours every Saturday at the CPS facility, with a social worker watching everything. Watching him see Liam for just 2 hours a week after being a full-time dad broke my heart, but at least it was something. Sunday evening, Aunt Linda showed up at my door holding the forensic interview transcript Marina had shared with family members who might testify. She'd been crying and said she couldn't sleep after reading what Liam went through. Linda admitted she'd seen Rebecca belittle Dave at family gatherings, making fun of his job, his hobbies, even how he played with Liam. She offered to testify about specific incidents, including one Christmas where Rebecca threw a plate at Dave for letting Liam open presents in the wrong order. Monday brought more legal maneuvering when Rebecca's lawyer filed a motion claiming Marina had a conflict of interest representing both Dave and Terry. The lawyer argued their defenses might diverge and one client might need to testify against the other for best outcomes. The judge scheduled a hearing but warned Rebecca's team about using delay tactics to drag out proceedings. Marina said this was standard defense strategy to complicate things and make Dave run out of money before trial. That same Monday night, my phone rang from a blocked number around 11. Rebecca's voice came through saying I was destroying her life and I'd regret getting involved in her family's business. She said I had no idea what Dave was really capable of and that she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person was raising Liam now. I hit record on my phone immediately and let her rant for 5 minutes about how we'd all pay for turning her son against her. The next morning, I gave the recording to Marina, who filed it as evidence of witness intimidation and violation of the no-contact order. Tuesday afternoon, the prosecutor called Terry with a plea offer of misdemeanor assault with anger management classes instead of felony charges. Terry wanted to fight it in court and clear his name completely. But Marina explained that taking the deal might actually help Dave's custody case. She said if Terry got convicted of even minor assault, it would validate that Rebecca was actually being abused, which strengthened the self-defense aspect for the custody battle. 3 weeks later, Victor sat in the witness chair at the evidentiary hearing, while Rebecca's lawyer paced back and forth trying to poke holes in his testimony. Victor stayed calm and walked the judge through every piece of digital evidence he'd found on Dave and Terry's computers. He showed timestamps proving the remote access software was installed while Dave was clocked in at work 20 miles away. Rebecca's lawyer kept pushing about chain of custody and asking if Victor could prove Rebecca herself installed the software, but Victor had an answer for everything. He pulled up purchase records showing the software was bought with a credit card in Rebecca's maiden name that Dave never knew existed. The judge took notes while Victor explained how the exploitation emails were sent through the remote access program during times Dave's keycard showed him inside his workplace. Rebecca's lawyer finally gave up after an hour of getting nowhere. That same week, our neighbors started showing up at Marina's office with their security camera footage. The elderly couple across the street had a doorbell camera that caught Rebecca leaving the house at 2 in the morning on 3 different nights when she'd told police she was home sleeping. Another neighbor had footage of Rebecca carrying Dave's laptop to her car during lunch breaks when Dave was at work. One family down the block had their camera pick up Rebecca in their backyard at night, which made no sense until Marina realized their Wi-Fi reached Dave's home office window. None of these things alone proved anything, but Marina said together, they painted a clear picture of someone sneaking around to set up their husband. Dave's boss called him into the office the following Monday, and I thought for sure he was getting fired. Instead, his boss promoted him to shift supervisor with a 20% raise. His boss said he'd been reviewing Dave's performance for the past 3 years, and realized Dave had never missed deadlines or made mistakes despite what he now knew was happening at home. The promotion meant stable income, which Marina said would look good for the custody evaluation. 2 days later, Scott called to say, CPS approved me as a kinship placement for Liam. I drove straight to the foster home where Liam had been staying for weeks, and picked him up with just a garbage bag of clothes they'd bought him. He didn't say much on the drive to my house, but when I showed him his room with the dinosaur bed sheets I'd bought, he actually smiled for the first time since that terrible anniversary night. That first night, he woke up screaming 3 times asking where mommy was, and if daddy was in jail, but I just held him until he fell back asleep. Rebecca's arrest happened on a Thursday morning at her job. Marina had been working with Detective Carrillo to build the evidence tampering case, and they finally had enough for an arrest warrant. I heard from a coworker of Rebecca's that she was walked out in handcuffs in front of everyone. She posted bail 4 hours later using money from an account Dave didn't know about, but the damage to her reputation was done. Her employer put her on unpaid leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. Terry's trial started 2 months after his arrest, which Marina said was actually fast for the court system. She spent the first day showing the jury photos of Dave's injuries from the past 3 years that she'd gotten from his medical records. She played the recording of Rebecca threatening to accuse Dave of abuse if he tried to leave. She had 3 domestic violence experts testify about why male victims rarely report abuse and how abusers use children as weapons. The prosecutor kept objecting, saying none of this was relevant to whether Terry assaulted Rebecca, but the judge allowed it as context for Terry's state of mind. On day 2, Dave took the stand and could barely get through his testimony. He described waking up to Rebecca hitting him with a baseball bat and not being able to walk for a week. He talked about the boiling water she threw on him when he forgot to do the dishes her specific way. When he got to the part about finding out what Rebecca did to Liam, he broke down completely, and the judge had to call a recess. Even the prosecutor looked uncomfortable pushing Dave on cross-examination. The jury came back after just 2 hours of deliberation. They found Terry guilty of simple assault, but recommended the minimum sentence. The judge gave Terry 12 months probation and 100 hours of community service. She said she understood Terry was trying to protect his family, but couldn't condone vigilante justice. Terry hugged Dave and me outside the courthouse and said it was worth it to get Liam safe. Marina told us Terry's conviction actually helped our case because it proved Dave really was abused, since why else would Terry risk jail to protect him? The custody hearing was scheduled for the following month, and Marina said now we could focus entirely on that and Rebecca's criminal charges. She filed a motion to have Moira testify about her forensic interview with Liam. Rebecca's lawyer fought it, saying Liam was too young for his statements to be reliable, but the judge wanted to hear from the expert. Moira took the stand and explained how she'd interviewed Liam using specific techniques designed for young children. She said Liam's descriptions of the photo games were consistent with coaching and fear rather than imagination. He used adult words no 5-year-old would know unless someone taught them. He described specific poses and positions that matched what was found on the website. Rebecca's lawyer tried to suggest Moira led Liam to these answers, but Moira had recorded the entire interview and played clips showing she only asked open-ended questions. The prosecutor stood up after Moira finished and told the judge he was filing formal charges against Rebecca for child exploitation based on all the evidence presented. Rebecca's lawyer jumped up, claiming this was just payback for her reporting domestic violence, but the judge wasn't buying it anymore. 3 weeks passed before we got the paperwork showing Rebecca pleaded not guilty and demanded a jury trial, which Marina said could drag things out for months. Meanwhile, Dave's supervised visits with Liam went from once a week to 3 times after the caseworker saw how well they were doing together. I watched Liam run to Dave every time he arrived at my house, and it broke my heart when Dave had to leave after just 2 hours. The visits got longer each week, and Dave started bringing Liam's favorite books to read together on my couch. Liam started calling my spare bedroom his room and asked if he could paint it blue like at Daddy's old house. Dave enrolled in every parenting class the court suggested, and his therapist wrote letters saying he was making great progress dealing with the trauma. Victor called me one afternoon with news that made my jaw drop. He'd been digging through financial records for the divorce case and found Rebecca had 3 bank accounts Dave never knew about. She'd hidden over $30,000 in accounts under her maiden name and her mother's address. The exploitation money from selling videos of Liam was just the tip of what she'd stolen during their marriage. Victor found she'd been taking money from their joint account for years and moving it to these hidden accounts. She'd also taken out credit cards in Dave's name without him knowing, and maxed them out buying things she kept at her parents' house. The judge scheduled Rebecca's criminal trial for 6 months out, which felt like forever, but Marina explained that was actually pretty fast for this kind of case. She warned us Rebecca would probably take a plea deal to avoid prison, which meant we had to prepare Liam for possibly testifying. I started taking Liam to therapy twice a week at a place that specialized in helping kids who'd been through trauma. The therapist had toys and games that helped Liam talk about what happened without having to say it directly. At first, he just played with blocks and wouldn't talk, but after a few sessions, he started opening up about the photo games. He told the therapist Mommy said it was their special secret, and the computer friends were helping pay for toys. The therapist said Liam was showing amazing strength for a kid his age, but would need help for a long time to process everything. Dave filed for divorce and emergency custody the same week, using all the evidence we'd gathered about Rebecca's abuse and crimes. The family court judge looked at the criminal charges and the evidence of financial theft and granted Dave temporary sole custody immediately. Rebecca got supervised visits only and had to pay for the supervisor herself, which her lawyer protested, but lost. The visits happened at a center with cameras, and someone watching the whole time to make sure she didn't try to manipulate Liam. Rebecca's parents showed up at my house one evening asking to talk, and I almost slammed the door in their faces. They said they'd finally seen all the evidence, including the forensic interview transcript, and accepted what their daughter had done. Her mother was crying, saying they had no idea Rebecca was capable of this, and they wanted to help however they could. They offered to pay for all of Liam's therapy, and said they'd cut off contact with Rebecca until she got real help for whatever was wrong with her. Her father handed me a check for $10,000, saying it was the least they could do after what their daughter put everyone through. 6 months felt like 6 years, but finally the criminal trial date arrived, and Rebecca's lawyer asked for a meeting with the prosecutor. Marina was right about the plea deal, because Rebecca agreed to plead no contest to reduce charges to avoid trial. She got 2 years probation and had to register as a sex offender, which wasn't the prison time we wanted, but it meant Liam didn't have to testify. The judge made it clear any violation of probation would mean immediate jail time, and Rebecca had to stay away from all children, including her own son. Terry finished his community service in half the time by working extra hours at a domestic violence shelter downtown. He started leading support groups for male victims and said helping other guys who'd been through similar stuff gave him purpose. He told me one night that hitting Rebecca was wrong, but he'd never regret protecting Dave and Liam from her. The men in his group looked up to him as someone who understood what they were going through, when nobody else would listen. Dave's divorce went through 2 months after the criminal case ended, with the judge giving him everything he asked for. He got full custody with Rebecca ordered to pay back the money she stole, plus monthly restitution for Liam's therapy costs. She could only have supervised contact if Liam specifically requested it when he turned 14 and chose to see her. The restraining order meant she had to stay 500 feet away from Dave, Liam, and anywhere they might be, including my house. Marina said it was one of the strongest custody orders she'd ever seen, because the judge was disgusted by what Rebecca had done. 6 months passed before Dave finally got the keys to his new place, and I helped him and Liam move their stuff into the 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. We spent the whole Saturday putting together Liam's race car bed, while he ran around showing us where he wanted his toys and books to go. Dave hung up Liam's drawings on the walls and set up the train set in the corner, while Liam kept asking if this was really their house now, and nobody could make them leave. The apartment wasn't fancy, but watching them pick out curtains together at Target and argue about whether to get the dinosaur or space-themed ones made my chest tight with relief. 2 weeks later, Grandma called everyone for a family dinner at her house, and I almost didn't go because these gatherings had been tense since everything happened. She stood up before we ate, and her hands shook as she held a piece of paper she'd written on. She said she'd been wrong about men not being able to be victims, and that she should have listened when Terry tried to tell her about Dave. She looked right at Dave and said she was sorry for failing him when he needed family most, and that she'd been going to therapy to understand why she thought the way she did. Nobody knew what to say, but Dave got up and hugged her, and they both cried while the rest of us sat there trying not to make it weird. The next month, Dave's boss called him into the office, and I thought something bad was happening, but Dave texted me that he got promoted to shift manager with a 20% raise. He started dating someone from his therapy group support meetings about 3 months after that, and she understood why he sometimes flinched when people moved too fast. Watching him actually laugh at her jokes instead of that fake smile he used to do around Rebecca made all those court battles worth it. September came, and Liam started 1st grade at the elementary school near Dave's apartment. His teacher called Dave after the first week to say Liam was helping a girl in class, who seemed sad and wouldn't play with anyone. She said Liam told the girl that sometimes bad things happen, but you can still be okay and have friends. Dave had to leave work early that day because he couldn't stop crying after hearing his 6-year-old was already helping other kids through hard times. Terry kept volunteering at the domestic violence shelter and met someone there who'd gone through something similar with an ex-girlfriend who'd hurt him. They started getting coffee after the support group meetings, and Terry told me this person understood why he couldn't handle loud noises or sudden movements. They took things slow, but by winter they were going to movies and dinners, and Terry actually seemed happy instead of just pretending to be okay. I started taking night classes to become a certified child advocate after everything we went through with the system. The program took 2 years, but I kept my job during the day and studied at night while still being Liam's backup person whenever Dave needed help. My first class was about recognizing signs of abuse, and I had to leave the room twice because it brought back everything from that anniversary night. Dave called me exactly 1 year after that horrible night when Terry defended him. He didn't want to celebrate but said he needed to mark it somehow, and thanked me for not giving up on them when everyone else thought Terry was the bad guy. We met at a park and watched Liam play on the swings while Dave told me he never thought he'd get to just be a regular dad taking his kid to the playground. Spring came and Liam joined a soccer team that practiced at the field behind his school. Dave signed up to help coach and spent his Saturdays teaching 5- and 6-year-olds how to kick the ball instead of just running in a pack. Terry brought his partner to watch one of the games and we all went for pizza after like a normal family. Rebecca's name only came up once when Liam asked why his mom never came to his games and Dave just said sometimes people can't be in our lives, but that doesn't mean we did anything wrong. The lawyer bills were finally paid off and Dave could actually save money for the first time in years. He started planning a camping trip for him and Liam for the summer and asked if I wanted to come along to help with the tent and cooking. Life had this weird normal feeling where we'd go weeks without thinking about everything that happened. Dave would drop Liam at my place sometimes when he had to work late, and we'd make cookies or build Lego sets until bedtime. Terry and his partner came to Sunday dinners at Grandma's house, and nobody treated them different or asked questions about the past. Even Uncle Pete admitted he should have done something when Terry first told him about the bruises. No, we'd won, but it didn't feel like some big victory because the cost had been so high for everyone, especially Liam, who still had therapy every week. Regular life just slowly filled in the spaces where the chaos used to be until Rebecca was just a name on legal documents we kept filed away. Thanks for letting me question things with you all today. It's been quite the journey together. Until we wonder about something else. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.